Hello, my name is James Prest. We're covering remarriage in the case of adultery. This is part 2. I'm going to pick up right where I left off, so if you didn't watch the previous presentation, do not continue watching this one. Now let's look into the book of Romans chapter 7 verse 1. Romans chapter 7 verse 1. It says, "Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. For the woman which has an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband." This is kind of what we read in 1 Corinthians 7:39 in the last presentation. In verse 3 it says, "So then if, while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man." Now I want to point out something about these verses. These verses have no mention nor indication or reference to divorce. You will not find it in there, okay? So this is not a divorce and remarriage thing, because there's no divorce there, okay? Let's look at verse 3. It says, "If while her husband liveth, she be married to another man." Now, if she has a husband, what does that mean? That means she's married, right? Okay. "If while her husband lives and she be married to another man, she'll be called an adulteress." Well, what happens if she has a husband and she marries another man? What does that mean? That means she has two spouses, right? Okay, so this is a case of polygamy. Now, Paul was writing to the Romans. The Romans were big polygamists, even on high up levels. Remember Herod and Herodias and John the Baptist, that case where Herod wanted to marry his brother's wife. And John the Baptist says it's unlawful for you to have her. He lost his head because of it. The Romans were polygamists, and this is why Paul is speaking. He's saying to the Romans in Romans chapter 7, he says, polygamy is adultery, okay? Because she has a husband and she marries someone else. That's polygamy, okay? We'll look at a Bible example where somebody had his spouse and married another, and it was considered polygamy. Let's look at an example. Abraham, I won't take you to the verses, but Abraham had a wife, Sarah. He married another, Hagar, and the spirit of prophecy calls that polygamy, okay? In the book of Patriarchs and Prophets, 145, paragraph 1, upon Sarah's suggestion, basically Sarah suggested, I don't want to read you the whole paragraph, but Sarah suggested thinking it impossible that a child should be given her in her old age, Sarah suggested as a plan by which the divine purpose might be fulfilled that one of her handmaidens should be taken by Abraham as a secondary wife. Polygamy had become so widespread that it had ceased to be regarded as a sin, but it was no less a violation of the law of God and was fatal to the sacredness and peace of the family relation. Okay, so Abraham had a wife, he had a spouse, he marries another, and it's polygamy. What is Romans 7 talking about? If a woman has a husband, she has a spouse, and marries another, that's polygamy. No divorce is mentioned anywhere in these verses. So please don't say these verses are referring to divorce and remarriage. There's no divorce here. This is a case of somebody being married to a spouse, they have a husband, and they're marrying another one. So now they have two husbands. This is polygamy. Okay. Now, we're done with the Bible verses. Actually, there's one more. I think I forgot to put it in here. Let's look at Matthew chapter 19, verse 9. This is the chief bone of contention here. Matthew chapter 19, verse 9. Okay, and it says this, "And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery." Okay? So, again, there is an exception given. Now, it says fornication. The word fornication here is the exact same word in fornication in Matthew 5:32, where she said that's also including adultery. Now, if you look up the word fornication, it's going to say harlotry, including adultery. You will find that in the original Greek, the Strong's Concordance. Okay? Now, well, let's look at it. It says, "Whoever puts away his wife, with the exception of fornication, and marries another commits adultery." So if you put away your wife, that means you're married to her. She is still your wife. Okay, the state of the wedlock has not been broken yet. If you put away your wife by bill of divorcement, because that's the context, and you marry another one else, you're committing adultery. Why? Because she's still your wife. Okay? Now, reformers take this verse, and that comma after the word fornication is like this big, powerful comma. Okay? Because it says, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another. Now, the word and is a connecting word. It connects two things together. What is the and connecting to in this verse? Is it connecting to fornication? Is it connecting to except it be for fornication? Or is it connecting to whosoever shall put away his wife? With or without the punctuation, the structure of this verse demands that the word and is connected to whosoever shall put away his wife, which means the and shall marry another is included in the exception. Okay, this is, you can go ask an English teacher, an unbiased English teacher about this, and because of the structure of this verse, with or without punctuation, the word and connects to whosoever shall put away his wife. So that means it could read like this. This is literally what it's meaning. I'll leave it like it is because I don't want to change it, but let's leave it. Let me read it to you basically what it's saying, because that's the word and it's connecting to the other part, not the exception. It says, whosoever shall put away his wife and shall marry another, except it be for fornication, commits adultery. That's what the word and means. It's a connecting word. Okay, and you can take this to a Greek scholar. I have done it. Okay, and they're very plain. They're like, no, it means that the remarriage is included in the exception. Okay? Now, I don't need the Greek scholar. I think it's very plain the way it's written, and I think it's plain how the Spirit of Prophecy talks about it. But please feel free to take it to a Greek scholar. Now let's get into some Spirit of Prophecy statements. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 7, 46, Paragraph 3. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 7, 46, Paragraph 3. It says, marriage, a union for life, is a symbol of the union between Christ and His church. So marriage is a union for life, right? That's how God wants it to be. That's what it is. Okay? It is a union for life. But what did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 5:32, and what Ellen White comments on in Mount of Blessing 63:1? That this union for life can be broken by sin. The marriage tie can be dissoluted by unfaithfulness to the marriage vow, which is fornication and or adultery. Okay? So marriage is a union for life. Okay? Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 7 and Romans 7. Marriage is a union for life, but it can be broken by sin, by the sin of adultery. And it's also broken, according to Romans and 1 Corinthians, by death. If your spouse died, you're no longer married to them. Okay? So, that's that. Now I want to get into the Monterey letter. This Monterey letter, I'm going to read you this little section of the letter, and you'll see it'll speak for itself. This is 17 MR, Manuscript Releases, Volume 17, 156, paragraphs 1 and 2. It says, again I saw, Brother Day, that the church has not taken the right view of Scripture. It's the church at Monterey. Okay? A woman may be legally divorced from her husband by the laws of the land, and yet not divorced in the sight of God and according to higher law, which is kind of what we talked about in Mark chapter 10, and it also appears in Matthew chapter 19. You can give them the bill of divorcement, but that doesn't mean that you're free from the marriage vow in the sight of God. Okay? Now, next sentence, she says there's only one sin, which is adultery, which can place the husband or wife in a position where they can be free from the marriage vow in the sight of God. So you're free from the marriage vow in the sight of God when the one sin of adultery is committed. This is what we were reading in Matthew chapter 19. Whosoever shall put away his wife, with the exception of fornication, and marry someone else, commits adultery. But if it was for fornication, which includes adultery, and this statement basically says that, then they can remarry and it's not a problem because their spouse committed adultery. Okay, so when they committed adultery, it was no longer their spouse anymore, right? Because it breaks the state of wedlock. The sin of adultery breaks the state of wedlock. It dissolutes the marriage tie. Okay, breaks the state of wedlock was from the Hebrew concordance, okay, from the Hebrew dictionary. Dissolution of the marriage tie is Mount of Blessings 63, paragraph 1, okay? And free from the marriage vow in the sight of God, which will happen on the committing of adultery, is this statement, okay? So this is not just Matthew 19, verse 9. This is several places in the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy. Now, it goes on. It says, although the laws of the land may grant a divorce, yet they are husband and wife still in the Bible light according to the laws of God. Okay? She says in the next paragraph, I saw that Sister Johnson as yet has no right to marry another man. But if she or any other woman should obtain a divorce legally on the ground that her husband was guilty of adultery, then she's free to be married to whom she chooses, which is just what we read in Matthew 19, verse 9. If the husband's guilty of adultery, if the spouse is guilty of adultery, and you obtain a divorce on that grounds, then you're free to be married to whom you choose. Now, the objections that I always get on this one is that that was a private letter written to a private individual back in 1863. This was not in testimony. She didn't put this in testimonies for the church, any of the volumes, so therefore this should not be taken to say, well, it applies to other cases too, because it was only for her case. They say this was a private letter. Wait a second here. It says, but if she or any other woman should obtain a divorce legally on the ground that her husband was guilty of adultery, then she's free to be married to whom she chooses. So if she or any other woman, that means any other woman in the same situation, okay? If she or any other woman, Ellen White is generalizing this to anyone. This is not just instruction for her. This is not just the laws of God that apply to her specific case. If she or any other woman should obtain a divorce legally on the ground that her husband's guilty of adultery, then she's free to be married to whom she chooses. Now, I'm going to read it to you again, the paragraph above, the one part. It says there's only one sin, which is adultery, which can place the husband or wife in a position where they're free from the marriage vow in the sight of God. And we read why, because in Mount of Blessing 63:1 it says the marriage tie is dissoluted. Wedlock is broken. You're free from the marriage vow because adultery breaks that. God joined them together into one. Let no man put it asunder. And it's put asunder by adultery. The bill of divorcement doesn't put it asunder because you're still married in the sight of God. But adultery breaks that. Okay? Now, I get objections to this because this statement in 17 Manuscript Releases 156, paragraph 1 and 2 is very plain and totally destroys the official position of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement. How much time do I have, by the way? I'm going to cover those objections here. Now, some people will say, well, it wasn't necessarily inspired of God. Okay? So, let's cover this. I'm not going to read you the whole letter because it would get exhaustive. But she starts out the letter by saying, go read it yourself in 17 MR. She says, I was taken off in vision. Okay, so she was taken off in vision. And then she says, I was shown some things relating to the church at Monterey. So she was taken off in vision and was shown some things. Okay? In this letter, she says, I have seen. She says that one time. She says, I was shown. She said that 6 times. I was then shown. She said that once. I was pointed back. She said that 1 time. I was pointed back and shown. That's 2 times. And she said, I saw 12 times. She said, then the matter was presented in another light. She said that 1 time. She says, I have heard many conversations in vision. She said that 1 time. All these together constitute 25 evidences from her own writing, of the own manuscript, that this was a letter written under the inspiration of God. She was taken off in vision, shown some things relating to the church at Monterey, shown this, she saw this, all these different things. So this letter was inspired by God. Okay? Now, the objection, that people bring this objection, and this one doesn't make much sense to me, but this is the ones that, at least the one that I was shown that was taught in missionary school, the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement's missionary school, Twin Lakes Missionary Institute. It was this. The letter was written in 1863, probably before the General Conference was organized. Okay, so does the General Conference of the Church have to be organized in order for the prophet's writings to be true? I don't see that it does. Ellen White wrote A Word to the Little Flock in 1847, before the General Conference was organized, and she wrote Spiritual Gifts Volume 1 and 2. And she began writing or printing Testimonies for the Church Volume 1. So whether or not the General Conference is organized, that has nothing to do with whether or not what the prophet said is true and can be taken for doctrine. It has nothing to do with it. Okay? Now, can we use this manuscript for doctrine? First of all, I want you to know it was written June 6, 1863, and it was printed June 4 of 1987. So it was published 2 days short of 142 years later. Okay, this manuscript was printed after Sister White died, long after she died. Okay? Now, the reformers will say you cannot use this writing for doctrine. Okay? They'll say you can't use unpublished writings to support doctrine. All right, and they get this from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, 465, paragraph 3. She says, I protest against the perversion of my private conversations on this subject, that's the hoop subject, you can read the context, and ask that what I have written and published be regarded as my settled position. Okay? So their point is what she's written and published should be regarded as her settled position. Okay? This is what she was asking. But notice she's protesting against the perversion of her private conversations. That's what she's protesting against. Okay? All right, so the issue is not, she's not saying that what she's published is her settled position only. Okay? Because she wrote other things. All right? Yes, what she published was her settled position. But there's nothing in here that says what she didn't publish is not her settled position. She was protesting against the perversion of her private statement. She wrote to an individual, they pervert all of what she said, and then start blabbering it off to somebody else, that perversion, and she says, I protest against this perversion. If you want to know what my settled position is, read my published works. Why? Because she published them. They're not going to be perverted because she put them out there. Nobody's going to have twisted this. There's not going to be an in-between person messing it up, okay? Now, we'll look at objection statement number 2. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, 696, paragraph 1. It says, and now to all who have a desire for truth, I would say, do not give credence to unauthenticated reports as to what Sister White has said or done or written. If you desire to know what the Lord has revealed through her, read her published works. Okay? And then she says, are there any points of interest concerning which she has not written? Do not eagerly catch up and report rumors as to what she said. If you go read this entire chapter, the whole chapter is about how she wrote things, and people took what she said, perverted it, and then give a report or a rumor, and people are taking it up. And she's like, look, and she gives examples where people have done this. And then towards the end of it, she says, and now to all who have a desire for truth, I would say, do not give credence to unauthenticated reports as to what Sister White has said or done or written. If you desire to know what the Lord has revealed through her, read her published works. She's like, don't take, okay, somebody read something that I wrote, and they report on it and give this rumor. She says, don't listen to unauthenticated reports. She says, if you want to know what the Lord's revealed through me, read my published works. Because, again, there's not going to be somebody in between messing it up. It's published. I published this directly. Okay? So she's protesting, the first statement we read, she was protesting against the perversion of her private statements. And here she's protesting against the perversion of her public statements. She says, if you want to know what I've written, if you want to know my settled position, if you want to know what the Lord has revealed through me, go read what I've written and what's published. Why didn't she say what's unpublished? Well, because it wasn't published. Nobody could go read what was unpublished. So to solve the problem of everybody perverting what she said, whether private or public, she says, look, go directly to what I have put out. Don't let any person be your middleman or interpreter Don't catch up rumors. Read it for yourself. That's what she's saying. Okay? Having said that, this statement in this Monterey letter actually, it kind of lifts it up from the sand a little bit. Because yes, it wasn't published, okay, but it was still written under inspiration of God. We made that very plain. Okay, and also this wasn't even a private letter. And plus she generalized the rule to anybody in the same situation when she said, or any other woman. Okay? But also this wasn't a private letter. If you read that letter, you'll find that she wrote places that were specifically, you could see that she was writing it and she expected Albert Day to read it, but she also wrote it in a way that she expected others to read it. You can go look at it yourself. Okay? So the Monterey letter and Matthew 19 verse 9 are in perfect harmony with each other. They're in perfect harmony with all the other verses because adultery breaks the state of being married. Okay? Now, I'm going to have to wrap up here, and then we'll get back with you in just a minute. So thanks for watching. I'll see you again in a sec.